Good morning. Today, the 16th of December, is the 60th anniversary of the formation of the glorious People's Liberation Army, Umkhonto we Sizwe. This day, 60 years ago, on the 16th of December 1961, Umkhonto we Sizwe carried out the first military operations against the vicious, racist apartheid regime. And it issued the MK Declaration, which stated there comes a time in the history of any nation where one has to decide either to submit or to fight. Evidently, the people of South Africa, the preeminent liberation movement, the African National Congress, and the whole Congress alliance had taken the decision that the struggle had to be taken to a different level, and that it had to include also the military resistance against the vicious apartheid regime. This was a seminal moment in our liberation history, and throughout the years, Umkhonto we Sizwe continued to be that cutting edge of the revolution, the spear that had been taken up to fight for the liberation of especially the African people. So today, when we celebrate Umkhonto we Sizwe, we remember the critical role that it played in the mobilization of our people during the long and hard years of the liberation struggle. The critical role that it played in getting our people to stand up and feel dignity and feel that there is indeed an ability to fight the apartheid regime. Every time a military action by Umkhonto we Sizwe was carried out, the people of South Africa were mobilized and energized. There are many members of Umkhonto we Sizwe who lay down their lives in the struggles against the apartheid regime and against imperialism throughout the African continent. MK fought in Zimbabwe, in Mozambique, and especially in Angola. We made our contribution to the liberation of the frontline states. And ultimately, we made a major contribution to the liberation of our own country. Since the first democratic elections on the 27th of April in 1994, the members of Umkhonto we Sizwe continued to be the vanguard of the struggle in South Africa. They eventually formed themselves into the Umkhonto we Sizwe Military Veterans Association, which as the essence of its task was to care for military veterans and to make sure that they get a life that they deserve. But that was never the only task that members of Umkhonto we Sizwe within that organization of MKMVA had. It also had the task to protect and secure the historical revolutionary duty of the African National Congress to bring full liberation, which always was seen also as including full economic liberation to our nation. In that role, members of Umkhonto we Sizwe were the commissars, the soldiers, the true fighters for liberation, honoring that message that Comrade Oliver Reginald Tambo, the longest-serving president of the African National Congress, conveyed to us all the time, both in exile and also when we returned from exile, that liberation in South Africa can never just be the vote, but it has to be also economic liberation. It has to mean that the majority of Black and especially African people have to take control of our economy and scale the commanding heights of all our economic institutions, our banks, our insurance companies, all our financial institutions. We know very well, and Umkhonto we Sizwe members and members of MKMVA have articulated that message over and over again, that we have not yet achieved that full liberation. Because the MK members have not been prepared to settle for half a liberation, for a sham liberation. Many of us have become the target of white monopoly capitalism. President Jacob Zuma, the patron-in-chief of Umkhonto we Sizwe Military Veterans Association, and one of the most illustrious commanders of Umkhonto we Sizwe, one of the most successful commanders, and someone who was feared by the Boers, had to be targeted, had to be subjected to the abuse of our legal system and persecution, because white monopoly capitalism and those who have become, unfortunately, the agents of white monopoly capitalism also within our beloved liberation movement, the African National Congress, were hell-bent on destroying. So today, as we celebrate the 60th anniversary of Umkhonto we Sizwe, many of us in MK and those of us who formed ourselves into the formation of Umkhonto we Sizwe Military Veterans Association have to acknowledge that we have not yet achieved our full liberation. We have to acknowledge also that the current leadership of the African National Congress have failed us. In fact, that many of those in the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, including the current president of the ANC, President Cyril Ramaphosa, can be described as agents of white monopoly capitalism. Under those circumstances, we have to acknowledge that those leaders have failed our liberation struggle, have failed that historical duty, what was given to the people of South Africa through the African National Congress, with the formation of the ANC in 1912 at the Methodist Wauchope Church, to liberate and unite the African people and to bring a fully liberated future with hope and economic empowerment to all the people of our country. They failed us. They dismally failed us in the last local government elections on the 1st of November, for the first time delivering an election result that turned the African National Congress into a minority party, a party with less than 50% of the vote, where a very large part of our South African population decided to abstain from voting, not because they hate the African National Congress, but because they are disappointed by the lack of leadership within the ANC. And they're disappointed with the manner in which those leaders are not delivering in terms of the needs, the dreams, and the hopes of the people of South Africa. More recently, we have seen how this very same failed leadership have turned on their own, are abusing their own staff within the Tuli House and in all the other offices of the African National Congress throughout the country. ANC staff members who've dedicated their lives to the African National Congress and to our liberation struggle. Many of them who have for 10, 20, 30 years been employees of the ANC, who know no other than the African National Congress. Today, on this 16th of December, which should be a day of joy, a day of celebration and commemoration, haven't seen 4 months of their salaries paid. They have been plunged into financial ruin, into poverty. They don't know how to look their families and their children in the face. They don't know how they are going to celebrate this coming Christmas and take care of their families, their wives, their children, their mothers and fathers. This is what this leadership of the African National Congress has plunged the ANC and its loyal and dedicated members into. So on this day, the 16th of December, commemorating 60 years of our glorious Liberation Army Umkhonto we Sizwe, we cannot do anything else but to make a clarion call that we have to return to the historical revolutionary heart of the African National Congress, that we have to save the ANC from those who've sold out, who filled their pockets with the gifts of white monopoly capitalism, who've become more concerned about their own economic advancement and stealing from the people than to work for the liberation of our nation. So today, the call has to go out from those of us who've been part of this liberation struggle, who've dedicated our lives. I myself and many other comrades within Umkhonto we Sizwe Military Veterans Association, who have now been in the ANC for over 40 years and truly, without any holding back, can call ourselves veterans of the African National Congress. We must call for the immediate removal of President Cyril Ramaphosa and the current National Executive Committee of the African National Congress. They have failed us. They have proved to us that they cannot lead. They have destroyed, in many ways, the trust and the hope that the people of this country had in the African National Congress. They have shown us that they will never be able to deliver a renewal and the return and a unification of our beloved liberation movement. So under those circumstances, we have only one message for them. Pack up your bags, take your jackets, and ship out, because you failed to shape up. Today, as we celebrate, let us also rededicate ourselves to the struggle and to the true ideals of that struggle, which must mean that every young man and woman in this country must be able to see a future, must be able to find a job. As a Black and African in South Africa, who are by far the majority, be able to be in control of their lives, of their financial and material destination, and feel that they can indeed benefit and harvest the fruits of our full liberation. We dedicate ourselves to achieve that. We dedicate ourselves to save the African National Congress from the charlatans and the sellouts that have wormed their way into our organization and are now in control. We will retake the ANC. We will regain control of our own destiny. And we will insist that these people who have sold our struggle must go. Aluta.